With certain brands like Pepsi, celebrities in the DNA. So there may be something early up front strategically where we say, you know what, let's use Sofia Vergara. I think when we were working with her, she had done some work for Pepsi as a very young actress in Latin America. So she had a relationship with the brand. So we thought, you know what, she's going to be great for Diet Pepsi because we want to do some storytelling. What's great about Sofia Vergara, she's such a good actress, and you can do it all without even dialogue. I mean, that's her face is so amazing.
Welcome back to the Bad Decisions podcast, where we lead not with celebrity, but with story. My next guest was at the helm of what I believe to be the most consequential advertising agency of my lifetime. TBWA Chiat has created some of the most iconic advertising campaigns in history, from Apple to the Taco Bell dog, the Energizer Bunny, Gatorade, Visa, and Nissan, to name a few. Rob Schwartz began his journey in advertising in the late 80s, climbing the ranks at Chiat and eventually leading TBWA Chiat New York as CEO. Along the way, he's worked shoulder to shoulder with legends like Lee Clow and Steve Jobs. He's shepherded campaigns that define brands, pop culture, and today helps transform executives in their careers in leadership through his coaching practice. Welcome, Rob.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, good to see you.
So let's jump right in. Take us back. What originally drew you to advertising, and how did you end up at Chiat?
What drew me was a poster of a bull sleeping. So when I graduated from college and messed around for a few months and couldn't figure out what to do with my life, I had a terrible job at Simon & Schuster Publishing. And I used to walk I'm from New York, and I used to walk from my mom's apartment, living at home. And there was this cryptic, amazing bull upside down, sleeping on a white, seamless background. And I was mesmerized by this thing. And this was back in the day when you did a teaser, it would last 2 weeks. And I'm like, what is this freaking bull? And then one day, same bull. And then I saw, bulldozing for the 9X Yellow Pages. If it's out there, it's in here. And I thought, wow, somebody did an ad for the phone book and it was cool. I want to do that, and I want to do that at the place that did that. And that was Chiat.
That is really cool. That's a good story. I actually worked with cows once myself. I forget the name of the agency, but it was the Happy Cows Come from California. Remember those ads?
Yeah,
and I show up at Sony Pictures, and it's like, hundreds of people on a big stage, and Fred Savage is directing the spots, and I'm shooting the print ads. and the cow wrangler comes up to me, and they're like, "Are you Mr. Nathan?" I said, "I am." And they said, "So how would you like the cows to look?" And I'm like, "Clean, I guess." And they were like, "Well, no, like matte or glossy." And I was like, glossy sounds nice. So we're doing all these shots of cows, in kitchens and in living rooms and all this stuff. And then the last shot of the day was two girls that were like YouTubers at a laptop. And then when their heads came apart singing, the cow's head was in the frame. And in the middle of the shot, the cow takes a 30-second piss right on the bedroom set. And a guy runs behind him with a bucket. And I said to the guy after the shot, I said, "How long have you been doing this?" And he says, 25 years. And I said, "You ever think about doing something else?" And he said, "What? Leave show business?"
Classic. Love it.
So in your early years, what campaign or project made you realize this is where I belong?
Good question. I worked, my very first job was at an agency called Altschiller Reitzfeld, which I know sounds like somebody sneezed. And what was cool about this place is that this was a generation post Mad Men. So the two guys who ran it, Bob and David, they were part of the creative revolution. So after Mad Men, for people who were not aware, there was something called the creative revolution. And we're just at the end of that now. And that creative revolution started by Doyle Dane Bernbach and those famous, charming Volkswagen ads, produced a lot of interesting creative people. And two of those people, David Altschuler and Bob Reisfeld, opened an agency. And I think I knew that it was for me at their, agency because number one, they hired me to be they originally hired me to be a proofreader, copy typist. So I'm that old that we actually, the creatives would write on legal pads and then I would type things up.
Amazing.
But I was also a proofreader, and I realized that, okay, this is good because I had typos on my resume and they still hired me. So that was a good sign. But when there was assignments that nobody wanted to do, I raised my hand. And that to me, just the fact that somebody was willing to listen to me and my ideas, and then I could get paid eventually to be a writer, that was it. And some of these assignments, these are always the worst assignments. I used to say I was chronically taking out the garbage. But if you could take out the garbage and bring back gold, you would capture somebody's attention. And that's a lesson for young people today. Take these unglamorous assignments. So, for example, we had Restaurant Associates, which had Mama Leone's and the Brasserie, some famous restaurants in New York. And every day in the New York Times, every Wednesday, there would be a menu ad and a headline. So 70% of the ad was the menu. So you were, you get 30%, kid, do something good. So you would do things like, I don't know, like there was like a fish buffet. I would write, a lot of fish, not a lot of clams. Oh, this is great. We did this. I remember we did something. They were having a beef carver for one of their restaurants from England come over to he was a famous beef carver. So the headline was "You're cordially invited to a celebrity roast."
That's great. That's great.
The silliest, goofiest things, but you got into the habit of being able to do things quickly because you have to write about 50 headlines to get one or two approved. And
right, just like being in a writer's room on a show or anything else. Yeah.
And that was it. And I got very good at writing these kind of snappy headlines, and that was it. That's how I knew, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, my first impressions of advertising weren't that cool. I used to own a web design agency and we used to do a lot of stuff and we'd work with the old Madison Avenue crowd and it was very suity. And then, it was kind of a revelation the first time I walked into Chiat Day, which is when I met you. And I'd seen what the place looked like because I knew Clive Wilkinson for many years, who was the architect of the building. And I walk in and I'm like, oh my God, I see surfboards and I see a basketball court with a skull and crossbones. And I see a chief executive officer wearing an unbuttoned denim shirt, board shorts and flip flops. And I was like, these people are cool. This place is different. So, jumping into that,
I think what's interesting is that, back to this creative revolution, it's happening in New York, but it's also happening on the West Coast. And Jay Chiat, namesake of the agency, and Guy Day are competing with one another in the late 60s. They go to a Dodger game, and over hot dog, they agree, let's stop competing, let's join forces. But these two guys loved what was happening in New York in the creative revolution. They just wanted to do it in California, and they wanted to do it in Los Angeles. And then Lee Clow, who's a little younger than them, who comes from surf culture, has a campaign to hire himself. He's bearded, and he says, hire the hairy. And he does this campaign to get hired, and he eventually joins. And what's amazing about this company, they start to build this thing in the 70s, is that they were about creativity. They were about doing things differently. And as much as they were inspired by Bernbach and the Creative Revolution, it was not about New York suits. And it was not about Chicago, Midwest conservatism. It was about California. And Lee, and he would tell you about this. He brings this surf culture, surf shops, stickers, the whole concept of being part of surf culture to advertising. And suddenly this is an agency that acts a bit like a surf shop. We're going to do stickers. We're going to do T-shirts,
Yeah, it was cool. Like every time I came to Chi, it'd be like you'd have a band playing in the parking lot, or and Lee Clow just is one of those people that he has that star quality like movie stars have. Like he is like a golden ray of light. He has like a real
Yeah.
incandescence about him that I always found really compelling. Tell me, he's synonymous with some of the greatest advertising ever. What was your first impression of Clow, and how did he influence your approach to creativity?
Well, I first, kind of encountered Lee from afar. He was, one of the icons of the business. I think there was an event, maybe in the One Club in New York, and I saw him, and I just, like you said, I was just sort of starstruck. Wow, this guy's really interesting. Telling some story about, the Energizer Bunny. I had applied to the agency twice and got rejected. So third time was the charm. And I got there around 1998. So the greatness of the agency had happened, and he really appeared on the scene in 1984 with the famous 1984 commercial. And
Yeah,
uh,
Apple's iconic commercial to the folks at home.
yeah, Apple's the iconic 1984 commercial, which, when this Super Bowl comes around, you will see it again because it's the most efficient commercial ever. Ran once and runs every year thereafter, in editorial. But the effect, I think, was quite profound on me because I was at school in college and we had a Mac lab. This is at the University of Michigan, and
Yeah.
we didn't have our own computers, so you'd have to
No.
go to the Mac lab. So first things first, seeing that commercial and saying, okay, I want to work on one of these computers. Okay, it was a Mac. A few years later, I saw the Nissan spot on the Super Bowl called Z Dreamer. This is a Ridley Scott commercial. And again, I thought this was really cool. This is the one, where a guy says, so I'm having this dream. And these guys are chasing me and they can't catch me. They're on motorcycles and, they can't catch him in a car. And then they can't catch him on a plane. And I just love this line, and then the twin turbos kick in. And again, it just stuck with me. And suddenly I started to realize as I'm getting into advertising, especially in the early 90s, wow, all the things that I like are coming from this one place, this agency Chiat, and they're coming from this one creative director. So when I finally got hired, it was, great to, to finally meet him and just start to watch him and start to work with him on some things. And I think, as a lot of kids don't see today, when you're in a place and you see icons working, you start absorbing what icons do. So people will say, like, how could how did you learn how to present? Well, I was watching Lee. How are you good with the clients, when you need to defend the work? Well, I was watching Lee. How do you just know how to kind of walk in a room and get, Tupac Shakur, all eyes on me? I was watching Lee. So a big part of his influence was just through osmosis, just watching him. And then the more things happened in the agency and the more, we started to work together, it was just, this incredible, cool, partnership in a lot of ways. We would work on things together and that's where, I just got even more. So, those are some ways that, he started to influence me. And then working together on certain things, I just, really kind of understood the power of visuals, and the simplifying things.
Yeah,
And then,
I
being.
mean, Chiat, you guys have a style, and that is austerity, spare, never anything more than is necessary, and that's kind of always the way I thought too. It's just like, what's the most terse, concise way that I can get a point across, and that's what I always loved about your ads. That's what the whole world loves about your ads.
I think that's a great observation. And I think part of it comes back to, well, this is a West Coast California agency. This is a
Yeah.
company where their work is produced on freeways. So the billboard becomes the first canvas for an idea. When you work in New York, especially, back in the day, print newspaper was your first, attempt to articulate something, then television. But in California and especially LA, no, billboard. And when you think about those old Nike billboards that the agency did for, back in during the Olympics, just the athlete, just Carl Lewis and the logo, stripped. And you just get to the essence of things. And that becomes the not only the aesthetic, but the ethic of how you work on things. How do we be most reduced to have the most impact?
Yeah, and great talent. So how important do you think culture and interior design comes to motivating and attracting and keeping great talent? Because you had very loyal, very talented creatives.
Yeah, well, I love this question. So I think one of the cool parts about the culture of the agency was it was always interesting places. So, it starts where, the agency opens at the Biltmore Hotel back in the 80s. I mean, it was just so random and weird, but this was this is where they were going to do it. And eventually, the agency got very successful, and they contracted Frank Gehry to build what people may know today, on Venice, as the Google building. Well, that was the Chiat building.
The binoculars building, right? Was that
Exactly.
one?
That's the binocular building.
As iconic a building as there is.
Yeah, and just think about the gumption of an ad agency saying, "Bring Frank Gehry in to build our stuff." I mean, just the unmitigated chutzpah, and that thing was, and that's where I first started when I started the agency, and the story that I had heard about the building of it, which your listeners may appreciate, is that they were working with Gehry, Jay Chiat, the founder, Bob Cooperman, I think, was involved. He was the president, and Lee was involved. But there was a moment where Gehry shows them, the model of the building. And there was like this sort of like boat area, there was this treehouse area, and this middle area. And he's like, "I got to tell you, Jay, this may be one of the finest things I've ever done." And Jay looks at it and he goes, "Yeah, I like it." And Gehry, again, this is how I heard the story. And Gehry was like, No, Jay, this is it. I mean, this is fucking it." And Jay's like, "Yeah, I'm with you. And I guess the tension starts to escalate, and Gehry is just so exasperated. And there's like a set of binoculars on his desk, and he goes, "Fine," and he puts the binoculars right in front of the model. He goes, "Fine. Have we put a set of fucking binoculars right in the middle of the agency? Is that what you're looking for?" And I guess Jay looks at it and just goes, "Now it's perfect."
That's amazing. I never heard that story before.
So I guess after that, then, the Chiat people leave, and I guess Gehry turns to his staff and he goes, "How the fuck are we going to build a set of binoculars for the front of the building?"
And it's funny. They've been bending metal ever since.
Right. But that was the gumption. And then, in the late 90s, the agency moved into that old helicopter factory over there in Playa Vista. And that was back when Playa Vista was just swampland and the Spruce Goose Hangar. So it really was
bird sanctuary.
Yeah, just, kind of this new frontier kind of place. And Clive did an amazing job to build that kind of advertising city. And I think what it does in terms of working there is that there was a part of you that knew you had to live up to the architecture, that you were not in an ordinary place. So you could not just do ordinary creative thinking. And I always had Doug, please.
No, I was just saying it was just disorienting in a great way that I walk in and there's like dogs running around and the basketball court and and I was just like, I don't ever want to leave this building. And I think, and that was the first corporate environment I've ever been in where I was like, I don't want to leave. I want to meet all these people. I want to know all these people.
Yeah. Well, I think in that particular place, the way it was conceived is that, and a big part of this was Lee's thinking on it, was that you would walk in this tunnel. You came to the boathouse on the outside, surf culture, walk upstairs, and again, it was like you can imagine for your listeners, it's a long rectangle building, but there's an extension of this interesting architecture on the outside, and it's painted, vibrant yellow and gray. So there's, on the one hand, your first impression is, wow, kind of surfy. And on the other hand, it's a factory. So there was that tension there.
But then you walk in and there's an array of beautifully finished longboards with flags of all the countries where all your offices. And it's such a dicks out. This is who we are. This is who we are. And there was such a bigness, such a grandiosity to it.
Yeah, I love that you observed that, because we were at that point, it was, again, this very California agency as part of a very global network. The TBWA network is a great global network. So just as you pointed out, instead of flags of our offices, it was flags on longboards of our offices. And then when you came in, you go down this long tunnel. And that tunnel was supposed to replicate the feeling that you would have when you would walk through a tunnel and then eventually emerge out onto Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
So the California piece comes into it. And then you were onto Main Street. That's where I met you, where all the creative directors had their offices. And then those offices were sort of up in nests. They were quite open, painted yellow. And then that Main Street was the beginning of Advertising City. And you had these surfboard. Please.
I was going to say, I think irked Clive Wilkinson a little bit. We were all at a dinner party one night, and my friend says, so how would you describe your architectural style? And I said, Clive did the Googleplex. He did Chiat Day. He basically builds Fisher-Price playrooms for adults. And he kind of shot me a look, and I was just like, that was a compliment. The plastic and the primary colors. And he was like, but whatever.
But I think play is a key word, because when you work in a creative company, that's what you're asking people to do. The first instinct's got to be, we have to play with some of these thinking, with these ideas and that sort of thing. So the rest of the agency, there were trees in the agency. There was a basketball court, and it was great.
So cool. Everybody look up the pictures of it. It's so interesting. So you knew this was coming. 1997, Apple's Think Different campaign. That was a campaign that changed Apple and Chiat and advertising forever. What was the nucleus? What was the seed of that concept? And tell me how it all kind of came together.
Well, that is a year before me, but I know a lot about it.
Okay.
Well, the story is that Steve Jobs comes back to Apple from Next, from his wilderness moment. And one of the first calls he makes is to Lee, which is basically, hey man, let's get the band back together. And of course, because at that point the Pepsi people had brought the Apple business to BBDO. So one of Steve's first acts is, okay, bring Chiat Day back to the business. And at that juncture, Lee mobilized a lot of great people, as you mentioned, talent. I mean, there's just so many great writers. And what they wound up doing is just, working for like whatever it was, several days to get to this Wednesday meeting. So if Steve called on a Thursday, whatever they worked that week. And again, as the story goes, they walked into a room, and what we used to do is, we used to do a tagline on a single piece of paper, and we'd pin them up. And apparently there was just a room full of taglines. And a guy named Craig Tanimoto, who's an art director, had written Think Different. There was a couple other good lines there. And as Lee did, as I watched him do all the time, he kind of like walked in the room, he absorbed everything, he starts pulling stuff off the wall, pulling them off the wall that rejecting them. So whatever, the 50 taglines are rejected, and he comes down to 2. One's Think Different, and no one remembers the other one. And they went up to that was like one of the linchpin pieces. And then the other thing was this premise of, well, if the world's greatest creative people used a computer, even if computers didn't exist, if Miles Davis could compose a jazz piece, he would use a Mac. If you names it's Einstein could work on a computer, he would use a Mac. If all the most creative people, if they could use a Mac, the Beatles, if they could create, they would use a Mac. That was the premise. And they put together, a beautiful piece of film, like a rip-o-matic of the idea, and they shared it with Steve. And that meeting, was sort of, okay, this is an idea that could actually, change the fortunes of the company. And there was a beautiful piece of copy written. There were a number of good writers, Rob Stiltman and I think Dan Mountain, Lee, at one point, just had this idea of, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits,
That's
the rebels.
the line. That's the one that got all of us.
Yeah, and I think this other line in there, which is, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And I think that notion, was like, yeah, this is a crazy endeavor to try to turn this company around. But that became the foundation. And I think today I was just seeing great ideas start on a Mac. In fact, I was listening to your podcast. I was walking on 14th Street. The ad that was served up, I'm like, wow, this is a very good ad. And the last line of it was, good ideas start on a Mac. I think that's the line. And it's the exact same sentiment as Here's to the Crazy Ones.
Yeah, it was really powerful because I think more people feel like outcasts in this world than not. I think most people feel misunderstood, and I think that's what's so relatable, is that you saw all of these, John Lennon and Gandhi and Miles and all these people, and you were like, maybe I am like them more than, the other.
Yeah, on my third time's the charm to get into the agency. I think that ran on a Pixar movie that was playing on network television. I think it was playing on Toy Story or whatever. And I remember seeing it on TV and just thinking, my God, if not now, when? I have to work at that agency. And then, of course, things happened and eventually worked out. But yeah, that spot is transforming.
So you were chief creative officer, just after that, right? So did you interface with Steve Jobs much?
I didn't. I didn't become chief creative officer until 2002.
Okay.
I was hired as a creative director and worked my way up. My Jobs encounters. There are three that stand out.
Okay.
So I will share those with you. The first was really inspiring. He came to the agency to speak to a number of us. And someone asked him in the Q&A, they asked, what's a brand? And he just had this really kind of, very Jobsian, talking about reduction. He just said, you know what? A brand is two things. It's truth and trust. And I was a little surprised at first, like, wait, it's not, creativity, it's not value. But the longer I've been in the business, the more I realize how profound that was, because whatever brand you're working on, how can you showcase the best truth to engender the most trust? So I love that. So that's a very kind of heartfelt one. My second story is we were having lunch. It might have been the same moment. I don't recall, but there were a number of us at the table, and we have a French chairman named Jean-Marie Drew, D-R-U. He's written a famous book and the famous philosophy of disruption. So if your listeners are intrigued by, great advertising, get into disruption. He's the father of disruption. And Jobs says to him, "Man, how could you be French?" And Jean-Marie just could not respond. And he was just vexed. And he tells the story that for years, he's been vexed that he never had a response to that. And we were at a dinner, and he says the story to my wife, and she says, when he said, "How could you be French?" you should have responded, "Just lucky, I guess." And Jean-Marie was like, "Fuck, that was the answer."
Amazing.
And then my third Jobsian moment was for an innovation called the iAd, little iAd, and he was trying to do a new way to do advertising on the iPhone. This was in the late 2000s, and he calls a number of us into this conference room, and this was great. And he's just a little bit late, and everybody's sort of there, a little nervous anticipation, and then he walks in, and he goes, "I'm going to talk to you guys about the iAd." And then he looks at the table. He's like, what is all this? What is all this stuff on the table? And everybody had their notebooks out. And he goes, "Put all those notebooks away. This is confidential. If you can't remember what I'm telling you, then my idea isn't good enough, or you're not smart enough to appreciate it."
I love this guy.
So those are my brushes with Jobs.
I used to get some, Jobs intel here and there. I had this dear friend from Chicago that I grew up with, and who was AGC, Assistant General Counsel at Apple. And so he's like, I would spend weeks working on talking points and ideas for his keynote speech, and then he would read it, and I would just sit there nervously. And then he would just get up and he would do it in front of me in real time. And he would do it. He would distill it, take all of my wonky stuff and distill it into this easily digestible, folksy delivery that only Steve Jobs could do. And then he told me one time he called me. He's like, "Hey, I'm in LA, coming to the Beverly Hills Hotel." So I go to the Beverly Hills Hotel. We're having a drink. And he goes, "I have the worst job right now." And I go, "What is it?" He goes, "Steve wants me to go to all the record labels and have this totalitarian meeting with all of them." And I go, "What's the idea?" And he's like, and it was iTunes. It was the 99-second song, 99-cent song. And he said that he went into this one meeting at, I think it was called Hollywood Records, was Disney's label. And he says the guy flipped out. The executive goes, "You tell Steve Jobs personally that I told him to go F himself and that he doesn't dictate what we do." And my friend Kevin goes, "You understand Steve's the largest shareholder of Disney." He goes, "He is not." "Oh, Pixar, right. Yeah, don't tell him I said that." And so Kevin just went around, and it was like, he's like, "It's non-negotiable. You can yell and scream all you want. You can geshray, but that's the deal. Take it or leave it." And that's how iTunes was birthed.
It's just amazing. I think his the Jobsian effect on the agency was just profound. I mean, again, it goes back to some origin stories, with Jay Chiat, because the relationship starts in 1983. So Steve Jobs worked with, there was a guy in Silicon Valley named Regis McKenna, not the other Regis, a different Regis, and who did all the collateral and all the brochures. And at a certain point, I think, Steve knew he had something special with Macintosh, and he says to Regis, he goes, "Hey, I think, I want to do a Super Bowl commercial." And McKenna says, "Well, you should call my friend Jay Chiat." So Steve meets Jay, whatever, in 1983, and they start this relationship, and then Lee and another writer named Steve Hayden, sort of get in there and start, pitching work and stuff. And one of the things that had a real effect on the agency is that we don't know who said it. Was it Steve or Jay? But somebody says it's more fun to be a pirate than join the Navy. And this becomes the part of the agency's DNA. That's why they're, skull and crossbones everywhere. And that became how Chiat Day, that was our mantra. And it comes from that original conversation between Steve and Jay. And of course, Macintosh, was the pirate section of Apple.
Yeah, I knew the phrase. I didn't know the birthplace from it. So thank you for that. I don't know
Yeah,
if you know this, Rob, but you're, and I don't know if you ever had a chance to look at my book, but you're actually in my book. Did you know that?
I know.
You were
Mm-mm.
in you were in my book. So I went on a trip to Kiev, to Ukraine.
Mm.
And you saw on my social media, you said, TBWA has an office there. Do you want me to tee up a meeting for you? And I was like, yeah, I'm here. Why not? So you sent this very California email to the boss over there, and I think it was like, "Yo, amigo, my friend Scott is in town. Will you take a meeting with him?" And I don't know why I was expecting like an advertising agency, like every other advertising agency, but I walk in and it was just like a conference room table and people putting Cyrillic characters on Pepsi ads that were made in California, and I was just like, I don't know if there's anything for me to do here. And they're like, oh, we have campaign for you. You want to do? And I was like, what is it? And they're like, I think it was Russian Standard vodka. And I was like, what do you need? They're like, we need a night shot of an aircraft. And I was like, oh, I can do that. Here's what I need.
Hmm.
Here's my grip and lighting list. Here's my budget. And they're like, no, we have like 3,000 euros all in. And I was like, it can't be done, because the prices of cinema
Sure.
gear are the same over there as they are over here. So that was a path. But then, and everyone told me, do not take taxi in Kiev, everyone. And I was tired, and it was a hot day, and it was an uphill walk back to the Fairmont. And so I took a taxi, and I got kidnapped on my way back from TBWA. Briefly
Oh my
kidnapped, but
lord.
kidnapped.
Oh my lord. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So this also,
I No, I would say that talking about our first encounters, for better and worse, but mostly for better. Uh, you are my milestone of my transition from youth to old age. So you were hired, I believe, by Business Insider magazine to shoot the cool kids at Chiat Day. I don't know if you remember
yep,
this. So you shoot like all
I
the
remember.
beautiful
Yeah,
at the agency and including me. And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
cool. This is awesome. Well, of the 13 shots you took, 12 made the cut in the article.
Oh,
And even
right.
though you took a fantastic shot of me, but I think I looked like an old fart and it wasn't quite right for the editorial. And I've always considered that moment, as much as I love the shot that you took, um, I consider that the moment where I became old.
It's funny how that one came together, and then Patrick O'Neill had me come back like on the weekend because he had this grand vision for his shot, which was great, But
That shot
but I
was
was just like,
amazing.
all right. I was like, I like these people. I'll come do it. And then Clive is just, why is my sign crooked? And I'm like, I don't know how to fix signs, Clive. It was a
That's a
whole to
great
do.
shot. In fact, I was texting with Patrick last night. So yeah, and the other interesting thing about the shy people is especially that era, we're all very connected. I talk to so many of the people from that era. It's
Still talk to
incredible.
Carissa, Bianchi, Xanthi, Patrick.
Xanthi, 100%. I talked to Xanthi. In fact, today we texted. So yeah, and even let's see, Jayanta was in that shot. Jayanta Jenkins,
Jenkins,
fantastic
yeah.
frame director, art director. Hillary Coe. I talked to her not long ago.
Is she
Fantastic.
still at NASA or SpaceX?
She's, I believe, at a space company called Vast.
Okay. I
She
always
was
liked
not
Hillary.
only like a super fucking gifted designer. I think she used to race like desert cars, whatever those are called, and I think she can fly a plane. And she may be one of the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life.
Ever.
Right?
I used to tell her, I said, you don't look like you work in advertising. You look like a model playing someone who works in advertising. But she
I
was very
know she
talented.
would like come into a room, and I was just like, "Oh my lord, this is unbelievable!" You were like, you're like a Greek goddess,
Yeah.
and her layouts were always amazing. Like she was such a great designer.
Yeah, and Xanthi too.
Oh well,
I remember
Xanthi
when
is
Xanthi made a style guide for her wedding, and I was just like, this is amazing. Like she made a color palette for it, and it was just like she was just so gifted.
Xanthi is a lioness. She is one of the true rock stars in our business, and she's over at Pinterest now. And I mean, there's just not a job that she did not make amazing things, you know. And she was instrumental when we were working on Pepsi and doing stuff with Sofia Vergara. You know, she was just there, overseeing the making of icons. That's what she was doing.
Yeah, so talk about some of your celebrity collaborations over the year. I know you did Sofia Vergara. Didn't you work with Justin Timberlake on, was that Pepsi? Um,
Timberlake, we didn't work with him, but he did the original jingle for McDonald's for I'm Loving.
right.
He was part of that.
Yeah, so
We
talk me through a little bit about the process of working, bringing celebrities into big ads.
mm, well, there's a number of ways to do it. I mean, we'll stick with Sofia Vergara because we were working with her on Diet Pepsi. Um, she and David Beckham. You know, with certain brands like Pepsi, celebrities in the DNA. So there may be something early up front strategically where we say, you know what, let's use Sofia Vergara. I think when we were working with her, she had done some work for Pepsi as a very young actress in Latin America. So she had a relationship with the brand. So we thought, you know what, she's going to be great for Diet Pepsi because we want to do some storytelling. You know, what's great about Sofia Vergara, she's such a good actress, and you can do it all without even dialogue. I mean, that's, you know, her face is so amazing. So we've done something, you know, a little charming with her on the beach, where you know, she had a little encounter with David Beckham. You know, people, I don't even remember the spot, but I remember we did stuff with them. And what was interesting is that we did this commercial with her and Beckham. It's somewhere on YouTube. You can find it. But it was at a time when viral was just starting. So we then used Beckham in another way, and we had him do some, you know, funny tricks with a soccer ball, and we created a viral spot as well. So it was just interesting to start to populate Pepsi with you know, with these celebrities at the time. Other ways to use celebrities. I mean, I'm also just thinking. You know, we used to use Robert Downey Jr. as the voiceover for Nissan. And it was interesting because you could, you know, do nice work with, you know, with the film and with the spots, but then you'd have this familiar voice. And I think for people, you would kind of lean in. You'd be like, wait, I know that voice. And this was at a time where, hey, listen, we have Iron Man doing our voiceover. You know,
No,
so
it's
that's
really
it.
cool and it's subtle, it's nuanced, and but again, I think it breeds trust that you don't need to like James Spader has done one ad in his whole life, and I think it was a car company. I think Infinity maybe.
Did Spader do Infinity? I don't remember. You know, there was
He
some
did one
fake.
car ad, and he's really sensitive to advertising. He's really not interested unless it's something that he cares about, and
I
he's just
don't
like one of
remember.
those voices.
We used Liev Schreiber on a lot of Infinity for a while. He was very good. That was great. You know, one of my favorite celebrity stories is we had the Visa business, and
Yeah.
I think you in the audience may like this story. So we're doing the Olympics work, and we have a great idea. And this is like on a Tuesday. The meeting's on a Thursday. And we're assembling the idea. We're getting ready for the meeting. And there's a very junior account person. And he's like, man, this is a great idea. And we're like, yeah, we think this one's pretty good. He goes, no, this idea is going to really, really work. And we're like, yeah, you seem very confident. What's going on here? He goes, this idea is so good because I actually saw the exact same idea done by Heineken for the rugby tournament. And you just see everybody who's working on this project just turn white. Like, what are you saying? Go get us that spot. So sure enough, it was an idea about bringing the world together, like physically bringing the world together. So, well, you mentioned Carissa. She and I are charged with telling the client, hey, we're not going to make our meeting because we had a problem with the creative. And the client says, listen, long as you make the deadline, I'm okay. So I guess I'll see you Monday. And we're like, yeah, you'll see us Monday. So all the creatives get in a room. We were in a conference room called Oz, which you may have seen. It was like our Wizard of Oz room. And after about 25 minutes of a blizzard of the word fuck done in every way, fuck this, fuck that, I can't believe this fucking thing, this, fuck that. It was like, okay, what are we going to do? And it just so happened that I was reading this book on Olympic stories. And I said, I don't know, maybe there's an interesting idea with Olympic stories. Like we just tell these Olympic stories. I don't know, we get like a Morgan Freeman to like tell these stories. And immediately there was a fantastic team, Gage Clegg and Becca Morton. They were like, we love this idea. And they just, Becca, you may know, you've worked with her. They just start writing these beautiful stories. And, Patrick was in the room and Patrick's like, yeah, I think maybe there's like kind of a Ken Burns. We can create a really interesting look. We can use still photography. I mean, people just started mobilizing. Great. So we want to put some things together. We work with, we call up Morgan Freeman's agent and they're like, wow, Morgan might be interested. He's going to have to see all the work first. But the thing with Morgan is he won't read anything. And we're like, fuck, we need something, And they said, but we have his sound alike. It's a guy named Tom something. Go record with him. So we said, okay. So we patched this guy in. He's in North Carolina. And this guy sounds more like Morgan Freeman than Morgan. And in our nickname for him, we used to call him Morty Friedman. So we have Morty Friedman on these 8 rough cuts that we're going to show the client on Monday. We go up to San Francisco, we push play, and the clients are like, love, love, love. This is amazing. Can we do? And sure enough, Morgan saw everything. He loved it. And that's how Morgan Freeman became the voice of Visa.
Did you tell the client that it was a sound alike?
I don't think so. I think not
I wouldn't have.
Not when we first played it, but
I love those spots, and I think I love those Olympic spots, and I love when the challenge of taking something so sort of ordinary as a credit card and drawing human emotion about it. And I know you did a ton of work with Nissan, and that was kind of a cream of wheat brand, not a brand steeped in a whole lot of passion. Like to me, to me as an auto enthusiast, to me, they peaked at like the 280ZX Turbo of our generation. And then it was just sort of bland. So how did you approach Nissan?
Well, Nissan actually does have kind of a core of Nissan lovers. And, it's a tricky brand because they made this switch from Datsun to Nissan, long before you and I were around. And I think it's always kind of hurt them because Datsun was very loved and Nissan was very misunderstood.
Datsun was the 240, 260, 280Zs. They're all still beloved and iconic and great Japanese design and kind of had a punk rock kind of vibe to it.
Yeah. So I think there's some very interesting stories that happened with Nissan. I think, Chiat's first campaign was built for the human race, which was a beautiful line. And then they did Enjoy the Ride. I worked a little bit on Enjoy the Ride with this charismatic Mr. K, this Japanese character. But they were always chasing Toyota, and it was just, it's just kind of a tale of sometimes they had great product and then the advertising wasn't very good. And sometimes they had great advertising and the product wasn't very good. But the planets kind of aligned in the early 2000s when this guy, Carlos Ghosn, showed up. And that's a whole other story about that guy and his fate. Eventually, having to leave the company in a giant music box and being exiled in Lebanon. You can't make this shit up. But in 2000, the French and the Japanese merge. So you've got Renault and Nissan working together. And this was a great moment for the agency. And we had eventually sold them this campaign under the idea of shift. And it was the idea that, a shift can change a person, a life, or the world, or simply the way you move through it. It was a call for change. It was a call to drive something different. And this line ran, in whatever, 50 plus countries for 12 years. But one of the best stories I'll tell you about Nissan and passion and shift is we worked on the Nissan Z. So the heir to the 240, 260. And the process is interesting. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that was a cool. The Z's look, all Z's are cool. The 300Z, I wasn't out. I was referring to sort of just the rest of them. But Z's are always cool. But continue.
Well, on this particular Z launch, we had a lot of high ambition, and we were just struggling. There are two, I think, cool pieces to this story that hopefully your listeners will like. The first part was we couldn't get to a good idea. So we kept doing these conventional things. And around round 6, I had a relationship with the head designer of Nissan at the time in the US, a guy named Jerry Hirschberg. And I said, Jerry, can we buy you lunch? Can you just come up here? We'll go to Shia Venice. We'll buy you a very good, expensive sushi lunch. But before the lunch, can you just sit with us? And on top of Oz was another conference room called Dorothy or Toto. I think it was Toto. And the creative team, Mike Yagi, Chris Lynch, a few others, we sat with Jerry. And we were just having this conversation. We're telling about all our problems. And Jerry says, sometimes when we're stuck as car designers, we do a 180. We're like, what's a 180? It's like, well, if you're designing a minivan for moms, you do a 180 and say, okay, this is going to be a man van. If this is going to be only for dudes. And it liberates the mind to work opposite what you're trying to do. So people start playing with this, and it's like, sports cars are always, slick and driving fast. And what if we shot this with just photographs? And what if this was stills? And we should have brought you in for this. But we wound up doing a campaign of just stills that we brought to life through motion. We shot with Neil Leifer. We shot with Mary Ellen Mark, a bunch of your peers. Yeah. And we had this very interesting campaign. It was very unique for a sports car. So the second part, so that was a cool thing. So liberating the brain by doing the opposite. And thanks to a car designer helping us with the marketing. Jerry really helped us, liberate us. Put the thing together. We worked on it with, again, this had to be a global campaign. We fly to Tokyo on the hottest day in the summer. So Tokyo is already hot in the summer. So I'm going to this meeting and I'm just sweat is pouring out of me, even before I'm pitching the work. And we have to pitch to the 3 key areas, US, Japan, and Europe. Carlos Ghosn as well. The big boss is in the room. So we're in this room. It's hot as blazes, and I'm pitching the work. Done. Ghosn steps up. He goes, great. USA, North America, how do you feel about this campaign? We love it. We're going with it. Full bore, 100%. Great. Excellent. Ghosn goes to the Japanese. Japan, what do you think? Subarashi, we love this. This is wonderful. We're going with it. Great. Goes to the Europeans. Amazing. Europe, how do you feel? So the English guy stands up. And he starts hemming and hawing and saying, well, this might be a challenge and this may be a challenge. And we think we should do some research and we think we should do some testing and we would like to. And all of a sudden, Ghosn cuts him off. And he just says, let me make this easy on you. If you don't buy this campaign, you don't get the car. And I was just as an ad guy, I was just fuck me. This is it, man. A billion, multi-billion dollar CEO backs your campaign by telling his group, if you don't buy, these ads, I'm not even giving you the product.
I love it. Were you part of the Were you part of the Hilton campaign with Paris?
Tertiary. I know. That was out of our New York office. I was CEO, so to say I was involved would be an overstatement. But I would say that I created the conditions for that to happen. And I think what's great for you to know about that campaign is this was an idea. For those who don't know, this was an idea to do a 10-minute TikTok in a 15-second media. The idea for the brand was Hilton was not only about destinations, but Hilton is amazing for the stay. That where you stay at a hotel is just as important as the destination. And this was Hilton's disruptive idea and part of their differentiation. So the reason why I'm very far from this work in terms of its development is that this is one of those, well, this is just a social thing. It's a small part of the budget. Nobody worry about this one. Okay, great. So the idea was, let's demonstrate that we're all about the stay by doing an ad that you stay in. You have to stay in this TikTok, and you can stay in this TikTok for 10 minutes, which is an eternity. Now, what's amazing about this, the genesis of this, is that this is an idea on slide 38 of a 72-page deck. And one of the people who was in the room for it was our head of innovation, a French guy named Anthony Hamel. And they're having this discussion about this, that, and the other thing. And he's just kind of like, hang on. Can you go back to page 38? That thing there on the bottom left of the 38th bullet point on page 38, this is a really good idea. So they pluck that out. There's a very young team that's working on it. There's a very young, ambitious client, and they come together and they make this thing happen. And I love this story because there are no small briefs. Any brief can be something amazing. And somebody was smart enough to, you had a spotter. You always need a spotter. And then you need like two people on the agency side and the client side who have the ambition to want to make something great. And this thing is one of the best ideas I've ever seen on TikTok. It's fantastic. In fact, I'll send you the case study for Cannes. It won a bunch of Cannes Lions, and the case study is amazing.
So yeah, social was kind of, throwaway stuff for the long time. And now, I stopped over at Milk Studios the other day, and there was a client that had 2 of 3 stages rented just for making TikToks in. And then the rest of it was were the print ads. So tell me how that landscape has changed, with the erosion of the magazine, and, there's still outdoor ads, and still television, but tell me what percentage of the work is designed for Reels and TikToks and things and YouTube Shorts.
Yeah, I mean, percentage wise, let's call it, I don't know, 80%. I mean, advertising, mass advertising, and I say mass because we live in a world of kind of multiple niches. Everybody's in their little niche, but advertising has power for advertisers and power for brands when you have eyeballs. So for people who are not in the business, one way to think about the business is who has people's attention, who literally has eyeballs. The reason why Super Bowl is still relevant is because over 100 million people will sit down and look at advertising. It's that many eyeballs. So social has become the place where the eyeballs are. We are constantly looking at our phones. And that has changed the calculus. So when you're coming up with ideas now, it's not, well, here's the idea and here's the big, manifesto spot that's going to run on network television. It's, here are some of the interesting social things we're going to do. Here's some of the interesting activations that are going to happen on the street. Here's some interesting, wild posting we're going to do that we're going to shoot with our phones, then upload it onto TikTok. I mean, the phone is the media. This thing is driving everything. Thank you again to Steve Jobs.
And yeah, I had Jack Osborne on the show, and he just said, when
Mm.
I have my TV show, we get 8-9 million viewers. That's a good day. He's like, but I am nothing compared to Mr. Beast, who will get 100 million, 200 million, and
Yeah.
some of these big YouTubers, and you know, cable, the price of ads is more expensive in broadcast and cable than it is on social. So pound for pound, I could see why those metrics make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're really trying to be relevant where the audience is, and it's completely changed the calculus of how you work. Now, I think the good agencies, um, because a lot of the deployment of the ideas is happening through digital, and it's a system, and you know, it's a tech company in a lot of ways. But there's still
Yeah.
20%. There's 20% of people who have to say, "Oh, what's the idea? What's the
Yeah,
thing?"
exactly. I mean, good creative is still the nucleus of all of it.
I think the power of this Hilton idea is that the disruptive idea of for this day, this is the thing that makes it work on TikTok because that was the demonstration. You can everything about us is about welcoming and staying somewhere. And by the way, you can also stay in a TikTok for longer than 30 seconds. It was just a demonstration of that. But you still need people who craft that idea because the machines can do everything else.
Yeah, I don't see AI replacing creativity anytime soon, and it's
I don't think so. I've been really seeing that AI is going to be a parody, media is going to be parody, these systems of working with brands parody. So what's the differentiator? Oh, the people with the ideas.
that's it. That's it. Um, yeah, there's a homogenization, but I feel, and I did a TikTok about this recently where I said, you're not fooling, none of you are fooling anybody with your chat GPT emails and resumes and things. It's just like we could all detect Photoshop 6 months after we figured out what it was. The human brain can decipher a BS email or letter or speech or anything.
Oh,
And
so
it's not the silver bullets. It's AI is not coming to save any of you. You still have to do the work. And look, they're useful if you want a sourdough recipe, sure, but true creativity, it's not going to recreate the voice of a great creative, in my opinion.
no, I'm with you 100%. I'll tell you where it is working, where it's augmenting. Because I think in some ways we have to look at AI as not a replacement for humans, but an augmenter of humans.
Yeah,
And when you're doing some strategic work, like we would do something called a convention hunt. So you would look for what's driving the category. What is everybody doing the same in their media buying? What's everybody doing the same in their advertising? What's everybody doing the same in their product mix? It would take us 6 weeks to do a convention hunt.
right.
Now it takes 6 minutes, and that's thanks
Yeah,
thanks
and
to AI.
in product photography, I think it does a perfectly fine job. I know for car photography, the heavyweight car photographers I knew on the East Coast, the art and
Mm.
commerce guys, they were just like, yeah, they don't really use us anymore. They wireframe everything out and they do it in post. So yeah, there's always going to be a place for it, but I don't think it's going to produce the next Hemingway.
No, no,
Uh,
no, 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 no. But listen, I
so
think. Sorry, please.
no, no, please, please.
I do think if you're a creative director, again, in terms of creative process, I think it could jumpstart things. We used to do this thing 5 by 5, 5 ideas at 5 o'clock. And it was a way to generate volume. And if you had 2 or 3 teams working on a 5 by 5, you had 15 ideas to start to play with. Well, now you can do 500 ideas by lunch. And if you're a creative director, you don't need 500 ideas, but sometimes you need, let me see 50 ideas. And
Yeah.
again, if not, I'm a big believer in working horizontally. I want to see things up on a wall. So if AI spits out the first 50 ideas and you can start to see some things, okay, this one and maybe this one and put these two together. Now humans, let's take these, little bit of brain farts that we have and let's turn them into gold. That's, I think, a good use of AI.
Yeah, and I think it's going to get better and better and better. Right now, I think it's pretty overrated. Let me
Yeah.
ask you something. You must have had countless pitches, ideas that never got greenlit. Can you share a few that never made it? Ones that you believed in, and maybe what you've learned from it?
I hate this question because I can never remember anything. What didn't get made? Yes, the first answer, yes. There's all manner of things that I've always wanted to do. One of the things I really loved. This was a little spot I worked on with Lee. So we had the McDonald's business globally, and every so often, the U.S. people would ring us up, and we'd come in and do something, um, and we'd done some fun things. We did a funny little campaign with Ronald on the bench that we got made. But there was an
Oh,
idea
I
that I
love those
really
spots. Those weird, funny spots on the bench. I really like those. I like the kid with the scarf one.
right.
Um, yeah, it's funny that I remember these because they were so like offbeat and weird, and you're like, "What is going on here?"
That was
And
that was one of my favorite things.
I didn't even know it was your work. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
but I
yeah,
just remember
yeah.
liking them and just something different from McDonald's.
Yeah, those were good. So those were made. Actually, Joe Pitka shot those. Those were fun to do.
Oh,
Um,
Pitka, yeah.
but I had this idea for this spot, and I sat down with Lee, and I love it because he was just an art director on this spot. Like here's this icon of the business. What do they say? Bill Birnbach, Leo Burnett, and Lee Clow are the three icons of American advertising. And here it was like, Lee, I have this idea. What do you think of this? And we just sat down together and just started vamping it. And the idea was an older couple in their 70s goes into a McDonald's together, and they order their meal, and they share a box of fries. And the woman takes the first fry and she bites into it, and we see the reaction of the husband, and his eye she's like, "Wait, what just happened here?" And then he bites into his fry. We cut to her, and she's like, "Wait, what just happened here?" And we then reveal as she takes her next fry, she looks younger. And he takes his fry and he looks younger. And they eat the box of fries, and suddenly they're back to who they were when they were kids.
I love that.
And it just said, I'm loving it. And just a little piano. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. And that's one, I love the process of working on it with Lee. That to me it's done. It's already done in my head, but that would have been a beautiful one to make.
Now, so the client was not having it?
Yeah, I think it was one of those where we showed it with a bunch of other things, and I'm sure at that moment they were just kind of like, wait, old people going in, we want to see some young hipsters, whatever it was.
I get that. I get that.
Who knows?
It's
Who's
funny
got
that
time, who's got the patience to watch them, become their younger selves, or whatever it was. I don't know.
Right. So let's talk about your current business. Leadership, agency transformation. Tell me what you're doing now.
Now I'm trying not to work. So I literally
That's all I've ever wanted.
I literally just retired from my ad life in September. So October 1, your timing is good. I so appreciate you reaching out. That was the beginning of the rest of my life as a professional. And what had happened in my last piece of my ad career was I became a chairperson. And the beauty of becoming a chair is the agency says to you, "We love you, but figure out some shit to do." And I made this interesting transition from the creative side to the CEO side. And part of what my remit was to advise a number of our agencies. And in an advisory role, I felt like, well, I have lived experience, but what other formal training? I feel like it's not enough, you know. And we had brought coaches into the New York office in 2017, and they accelerated our transformation. And I had worked with a coach at that. This was the first time I'd ever worked with a coach, and we had brought coaches in, and I thought, wow, this is really powerful. So I enrolled at Brown's coaching school, and I became a certified coach. I got a certification in one-on-one leadership coaching, and I got a certification in team coaching. And what I've do now is I coach people. I coach people one-on-one, and I coach teams. In fact, I was at an Amazon company last week, working with their in-house creative folks on some coaching exercises, and that's where I'm at, and I love it. And it's I liken it to not humbly, but I am humble in how I do it. I liken it to being like Rick Rubin, like being a record producer. That a lot of people that you work with, they have metaphorically, they have a song in them. They have the things that they want out of their careers. And I'm there to strip away the nonsense and kind of bubble it up. And that's how I approach the practice.
What's your methodology, and do you work with business people and creatives equally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I work with not only creative people, business people, brand side, agency side. The methodology comes from Brown's methodology, which is called ACT, A-C-T. And it's based on three dynamics. You start with what's the awareness? What are you aware of? The second part is once you're aware is C, the choice. What new choice, what different choice, what better choice can you make? And from that choice, that leads to your transformation. So that clever acronym of ACT, awareness, choice, transformation, that's the core of the methodology.
Very cool. And so are these one day things that you do, or do you have regular coaching clients that you speak to weekly, like a therapist?
Yeah, it's sort of like therapy. Therapy is more backward. Therapy asks a lot of why questions. You know, why am I always late? Why don't I not like to ask for money? That's not coaching. Coaching is more about situationally where you are now and where you want to go. So that's the difference there. One-on-one, folks, I try to do every 2 weeks. So we do an engagement every 2 weeks. It's an hour session, and it's a very structured conversation. If you are the coaching client, it feels like we're just chatting. But me as the coach, I am very aware of how the conversation is being structured because I need to get you in the most natural, organic way to take some action at the end of the conversation. So that's one part of the business. And the other part of the business is there's three parts, is team coaching. So you work with a leadership team. And frankly, that part of it is getting people to listen to each other. Almost every problem with a team, I know there's the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. 9 times out of 10, there's one dysfunction. They don't listen to each other. So that's a lot of that. And then the third piece are workshops, and they can take all different forms. And I just been working on one called a Creative Jumpstart that gets creative companies that have somehow become less creative and out of touch with their creative piece, their creative souls, to jumpstart and get back into their creativity.
That's so great. It seems really rewarding and fun.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. If you're a rock and roll human, it is literally like being a record producer. If you read Rick Rubin or Steve Lillywhite or, all these other greats, Glyn Johns, they are fucking artists, coaches. I'm just so inspired by the music business and how the producer works with the artist.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's different with every other with different people. I had a guest on here recently whose a producer just insofar as he can't be bothered to do whole records. He's like, give me the single and I'll turn water into wine. And he's done it 1,000 times. And we talked about Rick Rubin, and he said the magic about Rick Rubin, and they'd worked together before. He goes, Rick Rubin isn't really, he's not a producer like George Martin is. You know, he's not a musician. He's not a super trained guy. He's not a knob jockey either. He goes, what I believe Rick Rubin to be is the greatest A&R guy ever. Like, he knows how to just kind of get people out of their own way, and an arbiter of culture, and just a guy with great taste. And you know what? Sometimes that's enough.
Absolutely. And that's really what coaching is. By the way, I have a Rick Rubin story for you.
Please.
He sent a note to Lee when he moved out to California, because I think he was taking over Sony or one of the big studios. And his question to Lee was, how can you remain creative in a corporate culture? So Lee comes into my office. I sat right next to Lee, and he goes, he comes and he's like, you ever hear of this guy, Rick Rubin? I'm like, fuck me, have I heard of Rick Rubin? I was a big Beastie Boys fan. I said, yes, same. I have heard of Rick Rubin. He's like, all right, well, then you can come to lunch with me and you talk to him. Well, he wants to talk about some stuff. Very Lee, Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we go to Shia Venice. We go to Lee's booth. And again, you'll appreciate this because Lee's booth was Johnny Carson's booth. So when Johnny wasn't at Shia, Lee had the booth. So we go there, and sure enough, we meet Rick, and there he is, just like you imagine him. A lot of hair, a lot of Rick, a lot of T-shirt. And we sit down, and we have lunch, and, Rick's got his questions. And it's funny now listening to his podcast. My God, the lunch was the podcast. But instead of really listening and paying attention, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to be here, and I'm going to try to impress him with all the things I know about all the people he worked with. So I think it was a fine lunch, and I think Rick got what he needed out of it, but I was an idiot because I shouldn't have been trying so hard. I should have just been fucking listening. So
it's
that
hard.
is
it's hard.
Mediocre lunch with Rick Rubin.
I think it's kind of like dating. Like, if you're just if you're too into someone from the outset, you end up blowing your own head off. Whereas you always end up falling in love with the person that you were like, I'm not so sure, because you're chill. You're in a state of chill.
Well, as I learned in coaching, unlike this podcast, I try not to talk so much in the coaching. Coaching is really about the questions. It's the opposite of being a guest on your show here. And I think that's the magic of it. If you can ask people the right questions, you can unearth that which is blocking them.
Right. So where can everyone find you, your website, your socials?
Oh, thank you. First off, if you could come to my Substack, I think, anybody who's lasted this long on this podcast, you will like that, because there's stuff like this on the podcast, on the Substack. So that's Rob Schwartz Helps Substack. That's place number one. And my website is robschwartzhelps.com.
All right, great. All right, well, Rob Schwartz, thanks for being with me today. It was really fun.
Scott, it was awesome. I love this podcast. And I'm glad you didn't ask me about any bad decisions. My wife was like, what bad decision are you going to talk about? And I'm like, I don't know if he's going to ask me.
It's just a spinoff from the book, but, this is all of our success comes from failure. And this is what I always try to tell people, that you should, every time you fail, just say, I'm this much closer.
Love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for reaching out, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
The Bad Decisions podcast was produced by Brock Workman of Her Dad Entertainment. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. My book, The Big Book of Bad Decisions, is available for purchase wherever books are sold. A special thanks to today's guest, Rob Schwartz, for joining me. I'm your host, Scott Nathan. Thanks for listening.